of American history. The fight over truth is so bitter because power flows from the dominant narrative, the power to shape both public sentiment and public policy. In the telling of the American story, Andrew Jackson, like most U.S. presidents, is a household name. In contrast, the history of Indigenous peoples is barely known, and the stories that are popular are mostly wrong. Perhaps the woman was afraid of the book I would one day write. In the summer of 2017, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a post from the Muskogee legal scholar Sarah Deer. It was about a court case I had not yet heard of. A man on Oklahoma's death row was arguing the state didn't have jurisdiction to execute him because he was Native and the murder happened on the Muskogee Reservation. Oklahoma argued that reservation no longer existed. Before Muskogee Nation came to present-day Oklahoma, the tribe's territory spanned what is now Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. In the 1830s, the U.S. military rounded Muskogee people up at gunpoint and forced them into exile halfway across the continent. In a letter to Muskogee leaders, Andrew Jackson promised their new home would remain theirs for as long as the grass grows or the water runs in peace and plenty. That promise was not kept. In violation of their treaties, Oklahoma was created on top of Muskogee land. Since it became a state, Oklahoma acted as if all reservations within its borders were abolished. For over a century, the Muskogee Reservation was denied. While that might sound like a reservation no longer exists, that's not what the law says. On August 8th, 2017, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, one step below the Supreme Court, upheld the Muskogee Reservation. "This is a big F deal," Deer wrote in her post. "My tribal nation has a recognized reservation again." The case would ultimately go all the way to the Supreme Court. Their decision would become one of the most important rulings of this century for Indigenous land and treaty rights. I would spend the next 6 years reporting on the case, first for news articles, then a podcast, and eventually this book. I knew, whatever the outcome, the case would likely determine the reservation status of my tribe too. I grew up with stories of how my ancestors sacrificed their lives for the sovereignty and land of Cherokee Nation. What I felt was the possibility that the land they died for would be recognized as Cherokee land for the first time in over a century. It was a visceral sense of justice. I felt it in my blood. This case was fought over the Muskogee Reservation. My personal connection to it is through the broader implications it had for my tribe, Cherokee Nation. This book includes both Muskogee and Cherokee history, as well as that of other tribes impacted by the eventual Supreme Court decision, including the Chickasaws, Choctaws, and Seminoles. As neighbors in our ancestral homelands and Oklahoma, the Muskogees and Cherokees share a history that stretches further back than colonization. At times we were enemies, at times we were allies. Most of the time, our political relationship was more complicated. Because of our proximity, our histories share many parallels, but they are not the same. Our fates, however, remain intertwined. In writing this book, I strove to be honest about where I come from and my personal relationship to this case, while understanding the limits of my perspective and the need to include other Indigenous voices. In my family's telling, my ancestors were heroes for signing our tribe's removal treaty. As an adult and a journalist, I have tested my childhood understanding against the historical record. And, of course, it is more complicated. I am the descendant of white settlers, Cherokee enslaved.